Sorry guys, I cut my video off on accident. But when things aren't going that way and the other person is being, doing things maybe behind your back, or like I said, my dad likes women a little too much, and it kind of wasn't fair that everybody in my family was always like blaming my dad for everything. And my mom, I think that when we are with somebody, we have to take responsibility for whether or not that person has hurt us or not. We decided to stay in that relationship, just as I decided to stay in my marriage throughout the negative things that were happening. So I'm just as responsible as he is. You know what I'm saying? And so, I'm not saying that any of it was right. I'm not perfect by no means, but I am not a cheater by no means. My biggest thing was when I was growing up, I was very scared of my mother. She was very angry and bitter after they divorced. So there was a lot of tension, a lot of screaming over little things. And so it made me very scared. I didn't feel safe. I would say more emotionally, like being able to disclose things to my mom. Like if somebody asks you something, instead of just being able to feel safe to tell them outright, I would maybe lie about it because I was scared. Hang on one sec. Sorry, just wanted to clean my camera off a little bit there. That's better. And so with that, I developed a very unhealthy habit of telling my mom little lies over little stupid things because I was scared. And she would always tell me, I hate liars, because obviously my dad lied to her a lot about things. And so a lot of this got taken out on me. Now that I'm older and I can see these things and have gone through counseling and therapy. And like I said, I'm not making this video to throw anybody under the bus, to make anybody feel bad. I'm just speaking the truth of what I went through as a child and how I felt. But like I said, it takes two to tango in a relationship. So we need to take accountability and responsibility for things that happen. And just like with my marriage, I was not healed. I had a lot of things that I needed to work through before even getting into a relationship. I mean, how could we possibly love somebody if we don't love ourselves? And I'm just realizing, literally in the past few weeks to month or whatever, I would say, it's really hit me, like how much I wasn't loving myself, and like how much I thought that giving to others was being loving. But over giving is so unhealthy. People pleasing is so unhealthy because you're not giving to yourself. And until you have that wake up call of, wait a second, what about me? And then you start resenting and blaming everybody else. Like, well, you didn't do that for me, or, so on and so forth. And it's like, well, wait a second. No, I didn't do that for myself. But also, I also had people making me feel bad if I did anything for myself, calling me selfish, calling me narcissistic. Like I said, things weren't healthy at all on either end. So of course it was going to lead to a toxic relationship. And now I could see this. And, we carry that trauma throughout our lives. Even if we're not thinking about it at that moment, it's stored in our muscles. It's stored in our body. And until you release it, until you truly, and sometimes, obviously talking about it completely helps. Excuse me, but sometimes it takes more than just talking. Sometimes it takes breath work. I noticed is a big one. That's a good release. Yoga is a good one. We have to release all of that stored tension out of our muscles, out of our tissues. But the combination of both of them, of talking and also finding somebody that you feel safe to talk with, to release that crying. Crying is huge. How many people out there are afraid to show their emotions? I've never been one, but then I got the flip side of people saying that I'm too emotional, that I share too much, that I give too much. And I know that it's unhealthy to give too much, but at the same aspect, it's not unhealthy to be overly emotional. You are who you are. But now realizing all this, I hope that talking about this with you guys can help you guys understand these things a little better, just like I've learned along the way. That's why I make these videos, you guys. I make these videos to help others. I make these videos not for views or clout or anything like that. I make these videos to help others maybe release some of the trauma and things that they've gone through or things that they don't understand. Because like this whole process I've learned along the way on my own. Podcasts, what is that, Audible books. Oh my gosh, I learned about narcissism and narcissistic tendencies. I was just listening the other day about was your mother have narcissistic tendencies? And the more I listened to it, I was like, oh my God, me apologizing all the time for everything, or her disclosing my personal information to outsiders without my permission because she thought it was funny or whatever. I mean, I was like, holy shit, I never even realized it until I started learning about it. And does it suck? Yes, but it also helps. It also helps me realize that I wasn't crazy. I had some family members make me feel bad because I started making videos telling me that it's wrong to share my personal information on the internet. And because my mom passed away 3 years ago, that my mom would be rolling over in her grave if she heard me talking like this. I'm not blaming my mother for anything. Nothing at all. I'm just merely, if she was here, I would still be making the videos. We started to finally bond the last couple years before her death, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. She was a very over anxious, neurotic type person, and that was very hard for me because obviously I have anxiety myself. She couldn't understand why I wasn't more like her. She couldn't understand. She would always say, I didn't raise you to be this way. Well, that's the thing. You didn't raise me to understand that I am my own person, and we all have our own personal journey that we go about. I'm so sorry that if I didn't follow the beat of the drum that you wanted me to, because that's not me. That's you. You are you, and I'm me. But at the end of the day, we're all one. And the only thing that could truly, truly heal or help us come together in life is love. When there's hate, when there's animosity, when there's tension, when there's resentment, when there's grudges. There's a book out there that I read years ago before anything started to come out on the internet about spiritual cleansing and spiritual healing, breathwork, all this type of natural holistic type of healing. There was a book that talked about how like holding resentments and grudges leads to certain types of diseases, cancers, so on and so forth. And so my mother had breast cancer. My mother had a heart attack. She was not a very healthy person. She never really ate healthy, and she was also very stubborn. So, my son, he's a very picky eater. He was a very picky eater, I should say. And when he was growing up, she would say, well, why don't you just try it? You don't know if you like it until you try it. And then I'd be like, well, Mom, you've never tried it either. And she'd be like, well, I know I don't like it, stuff like that. And I think that sometimes too, we have a tendency to say, oh, well, that was an old school mentality. Yeah, but that doesn't make it right. Just because it's an old school mentality doesn't make it right. I'm learning so much, you guys, and I want to share my knowledge with you along the way. And I've gotten so many nice comments from several people, and it makes my heart just full of joy to see that I can actually help some others. I've been listening to subliminal messages, subliminal music, classical music, things of that nature are very, very, very healthy. I have to go make sure my client is okay because he was taking a nap. He actually wasn't feeling the greatest either, and sometimes I think maybe I feel his energy, but yeah, that's another big thing is that we sometimes don't realize that We are all energy. We are all energy. We are all light. We feel everything around us. And sometimes I think that can make a difference of, if we realize this, that can make a difference to realize what's going on in our day. My client woke up feeling shaky, not the greatest. And it's funny because this wasn't initially immediately, but as we sat down for breakfast, I noticed he was very shaky sitting down, and I started to feel very shaky. So you guys just have to realize who you surround yourself with is very, very important to know that plays a big role in how you feel. Continuously for years, I was in very unhealthy relationships. My daughter's first father, we met in high school, and we were very young. I got pregnant and we moved out. I moved out at 17. We tried to make it work. We were together for probably over 4 years. But like I said, we were very young. Things started to get a little physical towards the end, mentally, and I had to make that decision to not stay in that relationship anymore. And it was very hard because that was my very first love. So I loved him so freaking much, Moved back in with Mom, and, I couldn't wait to get out because, like I was just telling you, my mom and I, we butted heads for years. And when I moved back in, it only lasted for about 4 months. I was 19 years old and probably going on 20. I was working at Hooters of all places. I was going to college for nursing, had 18 credit hours, and I had a 2-year-old, and almost 2. And it was freaking hard. It was very hard because, like I said, I never had that loving, embracing relationship with my mom, that understanding. It was very one-sided. So I moved back out, struggled with apartments for a little bit in the beginning because some of them were too much. And what's so crazy, guys, is that one of the apartments that I had was $640 a month. Can you imagine having that now? So I finally found an apartment that was $555 a month. It was either a Polish or a Lithuanian guy that let me pay him when I had the money available to pay him. I was a server, so I never knew how much I was going to make. So as soon as I was caught up with my rent, he would let me know, and we would just do it like that. And I lived there for over 2 years. And then I met my son's father. Actually, backtrack. When I was working at Hooters when I was 19, I actually met my 20-year-old's father. I met him. You have to host this at the door. For those of you that don't know, it's like an initiation. You have to host this at the door for a month. And then you get to be a Hooters girl. So much sexism there. But anyways, I met him, and he was older. I think he's 5 or 6 years older than me. And at the time, I look back now and I realized he could sense my vulnerability. He could sense that I was not in a good place. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to have my first nervous breakdown. So much when you have a lot of change going on, sometimes your nervous system overloads. I was having standing blackouts, anxiety attacks. I didn't know what was happening to me. And I couldn't really talk to my mom too much about it, and then the voices came. I started hearing very bad voices, telling me to do not so nice things. And it scared the fuck out of me. It used to be so hard for me to talk about, But now I understand I was being spiritually attacked. I went one day to pick my dad up from the airport, and he looked at me and he knew something was wrong. And he said, "What's wrong?" I told him, and he said, "Okay," like very calmly. I didn't know that when my mom and him had gotten divorced, he had moved out into a little dumpy apartment in the city, which ended up being one of my favorite places. And he brought me to a psychiatrist. I mean, actually, a psychologist first. You have to talk about what's going on, then to a psychiatrist. And I got on my first round of well, I don't want to say antipsychotic, more like they diagnosed me with depression and anxiety, and they put me on a medicine that I can now look back and say that it's literally saved my life. It took a couple months to kick in, but once it did, I got my life back. I started to feel like myself. And in this time, I was with, like I said, my 20-year-old's father, not realizing what type of person he was yet, because, the love bombing and all of that was going on. And so, so I was going through that. Sorry, guys, I'm still going through it a little bit, but that's okay. So we were together for 2.5 years. I still had my little $555 apartment, and he had 2 roommates he lived with. And at this point, I was like, so what are we doing here? Are we taking it to the next step? Are we moving in together? Even though the red flags were red flagging. And so he didn't want to make that next move. So I said, see you later. And now I'm single. And I was working at a place now. I left Hooters and I was working at a place called the Clubhouse in Oak Brook. And I had been working with my son's father for a while. He was a bartender, but we were just very high-by. There was, we really weren't, we talked, but not even really that much of a friendship yet. And then one night we all went out, and like you do as a server, and we ended up hitting it off and started dating. About 6 months later, I was on birth control, and I ended up taking an antibiotic, not realizing that cancels the birth control out. And I ended up getting pregnant. It was really hard because, like I said, we were just having fun and whatever, but I wanted to make it work. So I wasn't just, that type of girl. So we moved in together. Plus, I was really starting to fall for him. We moved in together. I had my son, and we were together for several years. But in my heart of hearts, I cared about him tremendously, but I wasn't in love with him that way, I realized that maybe I had tried to force something that wasn't meant to be forced. But like I said, I wanted to try to make it work. And so we ended up splitting up. Got my own place. Was working 2 jobs at this time. I did end up graduating from school, but not in nursing. I ended up knocking it down a notch and going into health and fitness. And so I was teaching aerobics and waiting tables, and didn't realize it at the time, but the drinking was starting to come into my life in an unhealthy way. But I just thought I was like everybody else, I just thought I could just go out after work and have a few drinks. But now looking back, it wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy to go into work and make $40 or $50 on your lunch, on a slow lunch, and then go spend it all, and then wondering why I was falling behind on my bills and everything. Well, I had a place in Lisle Illinois, and it was $950 a month. And I kept up with it for a while. And one night, I actually started working for a place called Heaven on Seven. It was a Creole Cajun restaurant. I, one night, got home and had a couple glasses of wine, and I had started to think about my 20-year-old's father. And we had been almost separated now for over 3 years, and he just kept popping in my head. I really did like him a lot, like love him a lot. Like I really did. We had a very special connection. So I got out a phone book because I needed to look up. I needed some work done on my car, and I needed to look up like Midas or something like that. And yeah, phone book. And before cell phones, people. And I opened it up, and right at the page I opened it up, I see his mother's name. And it scared the shit out of me. I slammed it shut, and I was like, oh my God, is that a sign? Like I said, I had been thinking about him. So, of course, I was buzzed. So I called up the number. She answered the phone. Had no clue at this point where he was or what he was doing. Hang on, guys, 1 second. All right. So I called up the number. His mother answered. And she said, I said, is Ron there? She said, no, he's not. Going to take a message. I said, yeah, this is Jennifer. And I hung up. I got so scared. About 5 minutes later, her phone rings, and it was him. She ended up telling me later on that she called him up and was like, yeah, there's a girl that called that said her name was Jennifer, but it sounded like a nervous or scared Melissa. Which I was. And we ended up talking now. See, at this point, you got to remember, now I have a son. We were together. When we got together, I had my daughter. Initially, when we had first met, she was a little over 2. But now that we've been separated, now I have a son. So I'm thinking, he's not going to want to have anything to do with me. Well, boy, was I wrong. We ended up meeting for lunch the next day. And within 2 months, he was completely moved into my apartment. And 2 months after that, I was pregnant. And see, the crazy thing is when him and I were together for 3 years almost, wasn't on birth control, wasn't using protection, never got pregnant. And now all of a sudden, here I am, 27, pregnant with my 3rd child. 28 maybe. So, of course, I was over the moon excited because, like I said, I had felt a different bond with this man than my other relationships. Well, at this point in time, I had no clue about hard drugs or pills. I knew what they were. I knew they existed. But the extent of my drug use was alcohol and weed. Now, you have to excuse me, I have dentures. We'll get to that part. But, yeah, so I was doing laundry one day and found this baggie of pills. And he said, oh, those are my allergy pills. Now, this man had always had a stuffy or runny nose, always had headaches, said that he had bad allergies. Of course, I believed him. Like I said, I had no clue of what hard drugs were. I didn't know the signs. I didn't know anything. Until one day, well, actually, this had happened before I got pregnant because I would never take any type of, well, no, I had to have been pregnant, but okay. No, I don't think I was yet. It was like right before I had found out I was pregnant. I was getting ready for work, and I had a really bad headache. And he said, here, have one of my headache pills. And I was very, very apprehensive about taking it. He said, no, it's safe. It'll be fine. It's just a tiny bit stronger than a Tylenol, but you should be fine. I trusted him. He had given me a Vicodin. Went to work flying, boy. I was getting it done, feeling great. And with being an addict, him giving that to me just ignited that fire. Just ignited it. I got back like, whew, what was that? I want another one. But I was also still scared of getting hooked to anything. So I wasn't like looking forward or asking for it on a daily basis or anything like that. It was just a thought in my head like, wow, that was great. So, like I said, ended up getting pregnant. I was ecstatic, over the moon. But now, the one day I had done his laundry and found this baggie of pills again. And now I started getting hip to something's not right here. So I hung on to him. And I started getting ready for work. And as I'm going out the door, he was like running after me in his boxers, like in the outside, And he's like, do you have my allergy medicine? And the way he was approaching me about it was so frantic and ignorant and mean. And I knew it. I was like, you know what? Something's not right here. And I took it and I was like, yeah, allergy medicine, my ass. And I threw it back at him because now I had researched, I had looked up online what these pills were. Now you have to remember, this is the beginning era of the internet and everything. So I had to go to the library and do all this. I didn't have like an Android to look it up on. And so I realized that it was Vicodin, Loratabs. It was a mixture of heavy drugs. I approached him about it. He got very defensive about it, of course. And now this was when the roller coaster ride began. And I didn't realize it, but he was also very heavily into cocaine. Now, backtrack to when him and I were together. When I was working at Hooters and he had approached me when we had dated for those 2.5, 3 years before I left him for the 3 years. He was a weekend warrior, meaning go out on the weekends, party real hard. But I was always curious of how these guys could like stay up all night drinking and like beer was water, and not even get tired. Well, they were doing sugar booger, And like I said, I had no idea what any of this was. I knew it existed, but I was very healthy. I had my degree in aerobics. I was teaching classes. I was super, super, super healthy, right? I would occasionally, and I even had gotten my drinking under control. I wasn't even smoking weed at the time. And like I said, I was very healthy. So he would tell me one morning, I went over there on a Sunday when he was living with his roommates and said, oh, by the way, guys, I'm eating cashew and coconut yogurt. I tried to look for goat milk yogurt, but they were all out. Easier to digest. He started physically crying tears to me, saying how he couldn't hang around with such and such anymore because he was scared that he was getting hooked to cocaine. I didn't know what to do with this, I didn't know how to react to this because, like I said, I didn't really get into this. But I could see the changes that were happening, and it led to us breaking up, right? So, anyways, now I'm pregnant with his child, and just so many red flags were happening, and especially the attitude, especially when he was looking forward. I mean, he was hooked now. And a friend of mine, she said, do me a favor. And I was about 7 months pregnant. She goes, go in your bathroom, sit down on the toilet, and I want you to take your hand and run it across the counter, like on the sink. And my hand was completely white. I started bawling my eyes out. Because he was staying up all night, sleeping all day. missing doctor's appointments. I mean, it was very, very hard. And then if I tried to approach him, it was defensiveness. I mean, it got so bad that he blew a hole right through a septum of his nose. Well, he's a very talented man. He's an artist. He had a deck business with a partner of his where they restored and restorated decks and fences. And one day his partner wanted to cut ties because he couldn't deal with him anymore. He was spending the deposits. Too many things were happening. And he actually, backtrack to when I had that apartment that he moved into in Lisle that was $950 a month. The last couple months, we didn't have any money to pay for the rent. And I was, busting my ass working, and he would sometimes work, wouldn't sometimes. He had all kinds of excuses in the book, right? So we ended up having to move out, but I'm like, well, where are we going to go? Now I'm about to have my third child, and I was freaking out. And his partner's parents, they were older. They ended up, they had a townhouse. And since they had both passed away, he was willing to rent us this townhouse for $1,000 a month. And, so we could have a place. And oh my God, it was so nice. But the only thing was it was an older community. So we had to be on our best behavior. I was so excited, you guys. Like, it was so nice. His family even had a housewarming for us, bought us all our furniture. And now I was his secretary. I was, running the books for the deck business. And we were there for, I'm not quite sure exactly how long, but now, I'm 6 months pregnant. And we move in there and everything's looking up. Except, a month or two later when the attitude started changing and he was missing doctor's appointments, and then I found the cocaine in my hand in the bathroom. And I was so beside myself, you guys, because I didn't know what to do. Like I said, if I approached him, he was defensive. Like, it was just, I felt like a rock in a hard place. And then his partner came over one day and wanted to cut ties because he knew he was a recovering addict himself. He tried talking with him. It was no use. So now he said, because what we were doing was we were renting to own. So we had put in about $10,000, and he was going to give that back to us, but he was splitting it, $5,000 for me, $5,000 for him. And he even pulled me aside and was like, if I were you, I would take that money and run. But of course I didn't. Of course, now after this, it was apartment to apartment till finally, and now I had my daughter, and it was just, I'm not going to go into all of the details of everything, but the gaslighting, when somebody's on hardcore drugs, they're not themselves. And now I'm trying to raise 3 kids, trying to work and raise 3 kids and deal with him. And we ended up getting this garden apartment, and it was like every 6 months we were moving. We ended up getting this garden apartment, and the Lord was looking out for me because the day we had signed the lease, he was too messed up or coming down from being messed up. And now at this point, I didn't realize, but he was taking methadone pills from his brother to try to feel better from the coke. So he was trying to counteract and balance everything out, right? But just developing more and more habits. So he didn't sign the lease, and which was a blessing in disguise because I was running out of options of what to do. And my dad lives in Arizona, and so I had planned to have my son and my daughter, the older two, stay here with their dads and take Summer, my daughter that was with Ron, take her with me to Arizona to try to move out there for about 6 months to save up and start over because I had nothing, you guys. I mean, every dollar that I made, he would take. And so one day, he was on the couch and I was getting ready to do all this. And now I was so nervous because now I'm getting ready to call the authorities to have him removed from my place because it was only my signature. And it was so sad. They had to give him $5 because he didn't even have gas in his car to leave. And after that, I packed up, she was 2.5 at the time, and ended up moving out to Arizona for 6 months or so to save up to start over. Well, did just that. Actually bought a car when I got back. I was feeling really good, but then problem was my credit was trashed because of him and from signing leases and moving from apartments and having to leave and so on and so forth. And so at this point, when I got back, I needed a co-signer. And my parents wouldn't co-sign for me. I had nobody to co-sign for me except for one person. And who do you think that was? Him, of course. And the cycle started all over again. That was an 11-year on and off relationship that put me through the ringer. And you guys can use your imaginations. I don't need to sit here and go through those emotions again. That we would be here forever. But long story short, the end result of everything was my older two kids stayed. He co-signed for an apartment. We stayed there for a few months, couldn't afford it. It was $1,250 a month. And then again, he had a friend that had a house that if we could help him rehab it, he would rent it out to us for $1,000 a month. So that's exactly what we did. We helped rip out the carpet, we helped rehab it, and now we have a house that we were living in for $1,000 a month. Things just got worse. The drugs got worse. The types of drugs got worse. And now it's to the point where my mom was threatening that if I didn't do something, she was going to call DCFS on us. And that's exactly what ended up happening. I was going to pantries for food. I was waiting tables. Again, I was working for Red Robin, but every dime that I made, he would tackle me down to get the money off of my persons. It got that bad. It got so physical. And I had my daughter at the time, I think she was 12 or 13, and my son was like 6 or 7, ended up going to live with their dads because I didn't want them to be taken from DCFS. And my mom finally ended up doing it. And she called DCFS, and now at this time, I was drinking, but I wasn't drinking and smoking weed, but I wasn't doing any hard drugs. So when you have DCFS, you have to obviously have the conditions of the house good, which I always made sure was good. But that was something that was very hard, with like I said, my mom and I always struggled. I blamed her for a long time on that one, but then I understood she was at her end of her rope with what to do. And that was the decision she made. She ended up apologizing to me in her words later on that if she would have known making that call would have ended things up the way that they did, she never would have done it. And I said, we can't think like that. Bygones be bygones. You did what you thought was right at the time for the kids. But once you get them involved, it's very hard to get them out of your life. So they're involved, and now I'm still living with him with Summer. The other kids are living with their dads. And now we have to do random drug drops and random drug tests. And we had to do one. I passed, and he didn't. And since I live with him, if I wanted to keep Summer, I had to take her and leave and go somewhere. And I had nowhere to go. My mom didn't want me living with her anymore, which I understood. I already burned bridges everywhere. And so that was it. Somebody had to take her because I didn't know where else to go at the time. I didn't really, I didn't know, I didn't have that support. So I didn't know about shelters and all those things. Like, I didn't understand. And I was so depressed and so down, and my drinking started to get worse. I was sneaking wine in coffee cups, while I was driving. It was horrible because my depression got so bad. And then the drinking was just making my depression worse. And so now it was either my mom had to take my daughter or his sister. Well, my mom said she was too old. She was only 60, but whatever. And so his sister ended up taking Summer, and there I was, stuck in the house, just me and him, no kids. I must have cried for 2 weeks straight, didn't get out of bed, like just blaming the world for all of everything that was happening instead of looking at my own self. Finally pulled myself out of the mud and got up, and now he was starting to become literally unhinged. Don't really want to go into the details of that story because it's not something I like to think about. And I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it on the internet, but it ended up with him chasing me around for $20 that I had in my pocket. He detained me in a bathroom, locked me in a bathroom for over 2 hours. He did get physical with me, and it ended up with me jumping out of a window. It wasn't that high, but I ended up with bruises everywhere, black eye, bloody nose. And I ran up to the 7-Eleven with no shoes on and asked to call 911. And that was it. That was literally the end of our 11-year roller coaster ride of that relationship. And yeah, so now I'm on the journey of trying to get my daughter back of DCFS. But like I said, I didn't have proper support. My mom and our bridges were burned. My dad's all the way in Arizona. And I ended up staying with a friend for a little while. And I started smoking weed more. I started drinking more. I got trapped in the addiction and the depression for almost 2 years, thinking I was doing the right things by having supervised visits with DCFS, thinking I was doing the right thing by drinking the night before, but then the next day they could smell it on my breath, so then didn't give me my visit, blaming the world. I was blaming everybody else but myself for the mistakes that I had made. And it's hard when you go through depression and anxiety and you're trapped in your own head and you're trapped in your own addiction and you don't have the proper support. You have everybody pointing a finger at you and you just don't know how to get out. It was very hard. It was very hard. And then I ended up going into rehab for a month, came out, was doing really good for a while, and then just I was struggling. And they tell you in NA and AA that some people just don't make it, and it's not their fault. Addiction is a disease. And see, I didn't know, because I always was having people say, just stop for your kids. And it's like, do you think I enjoy this? Do you think I enjoy living like this, in and out of hotels, living in tents sometimes? I mean, it was rough. It was rough, you guys. And but her aunt has done a wonderful job taking care of her throughout the years. I never got back full custody because I could have at a point now when I had gone into rehab again for the second or third time. I went through 3 different detoxes of alcohol, and then I was done. I ended up meeting my last 2 children's father in rehab. Oh God, that's for another day. But, you think that you could relate with someone, and basically when I met him, when I got out of rehab, I went back to my mom's house for a day and a half, and my stepdad said it's either her or me, so I ended up leaving, going back with him. And when I went back with him, I moved in with him and never left. He told me that the house was his, but his parents were there sometimes. There's a bunch of lies, whatever. Again, love bombing, all that shit. But I love that man a lot, and this is my current husband or ex-husband now. And we were together the first couple of years before I had gotten pregnant. But the thing is we were sober together for about 2.5 months, and then fell off using pills. And this was when I went into a whole different journey of using heroin. I didn't realize that he had had such a bad heroin habit on and off for 15 years. His ex-wife died because of it. Just a lot of toxicity there too. And going back into that same cycle. That's the whole point of what I'm talking about here from the beginning, is when you don't love yourself, you don't know how to properly love anybody else. And I had so much guilt and so much shame, and I was letting that completely control my life. Completely run it. And now I realize that. My mom had made me feel so guilty and so shameful about who I was, because I wasn't like her, but I could only be me. And with that said, here I am. Now I'm 14 years clean of alcohol, 11 days clean of THC. My ex-husband and I now, we've been separated for 2 years. He didn't have a drink or a drug for 10 years, and then decided to pick up drinking. And the day when that happened, it was like a knife in my heart, because I knew that it was over, even though I stayed for a couple of years after that. But I couldn't be around the alcohol. I couldn't risk losing everything that I worked so hard for with my sobriety. And since it was his in-laws, since it was his parents' house, I had to leave. I actually left once, went to a shelter for 9 days. He talked me back into coming back. I went back, stayed for about another 1.5 years, and then finally ended up with some really bad things happening to our pets. He would do anything just to get back at me. Always making me feel guilty if I didn't have sex with him all the time. Telling me that he thinks that he had a problem with that. And I'm like, and what, I'm your solution? Well, you're my wife. You're supposed to do these things. Just always gaslighting and making me feel guilty. And that's what I mean, the guilt and the shame that everybody, and I allowed it. Nobody else but me. I don't blame anybody for anything that has transpired in my life. I take full responsibility, because we all have free will and we all have a choice. And I chose those people that I was with. I chose. And that's why it is so important about who you surround yourself with. I'm hoping now that my mom, looking down at me from heaven, I hope that she's proud of me, because she would always be like, why do you always need a man in your life? And it's true, I always was constantly in toxic relationships. And well, that's because of, a lot of things from childhood. But, she just wasn't able to see that. Like I said, I think she has narcissistic behaviors, but that's no here nor there. It is what it is. And great people in this world have started or came from real shitty toxic situations and paved the way for a better life for themselves. But having proper community and proper support is so key. Having proper help, but actually wanting the help too. I'm just glad that I made it out. Like I said, I'm now 14 years clean, 11 days of THC. And I'm finally, for the first time, I've been a caregiver now for a little over a year with my job. I'm independent with my money. I'm able to take care of my kids financially. My last two kids that are 12 and 13, I'm able to take care of them financially. The only thing that's missing is now getting a stable place for us. Like I said, sometimes during the week, I will, when I'm not at work, because I'm here from Friday through Tuesday, but when I'm not here and I'm with them Tuesday through Friday morning or Thursday night, sometimes I'll get a hotel room for the night, but it's pricey. And that's why I chose to maybe have a hotel room for one night, and then the other two I sleep in my car so I can save up money. I was saving really good for a while, but then things came into play. My kid needed a root canal. That was $900 out of pocket. Car insurance, accidents, tickets, things come up. Things need to be paid. And unfortunately, their father is still actively in his addiction. They currently stay at the house with him and the grandpa, so they could remain in school. I don't feel that they are unsafe with him. Emotionally is what bothers me because he just doesn't get it. He has waves of sobriety, like where he'll be clean for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, but then falls back heavily into drinking. They're 12 and 13, so they're old enough to be self-sufficient and know that if at any time they need anything, if there's an emergency, I am there. Like I've been. His mom passed away a year ago from the stress of him, honestly, and other things too. But the gaslighting, the narcissism, everything, it's very unhealthy. And I'm trying so. And shelters, if you want to get into a shelter now, forget about it. A few years back before Biden was in office, and when they were letting all the immigrants in and putting them up in housing, and he gave it all away. He gave it all away and messed everything up. Because the very first time I had gotten to that shelter, like I said, I got into one that night. The girls, they didn't come with me full time there, but they were with me there 2 nights a week. But that was the thing also too, was they required for them to be there full time. And like I said, he talked me into going back, which I did. I wasn't strong enough yet. I wish I would have been, but this is the path. This was the journey the way it's supposed to be. So now this time around, to get into a shelter, or if you're a victim of domestic violence, you have to have the kids with you. And plus two, the problem is there's nothing available. Nothing available. Everything, it is so hard. There is a 15 to 25 year waiting list for Section 8. And, now with the job that I have, I currently do make enough to be, I make too much for any type of government help. And yeah, so now I took on a second job with DoorDash, so now I'm trying my hardest to save up every little penny I can to put towards a place, hopefully by end of September, beginning of October, if everything goes according to plan. But like, what is the saying? Life gets in the way when you're busy making plans. So if everything goes according to plan, I will have enough money to put down on a place by then. So let's keep our fingers crossed. And I appreciate you guys for taking the time to listen to my story. Just wanted to give you a general idea of how I ended up where I am at the moment. And you are stronger than you know. You are stronger than you think. You deserve to be treated with love and kindness and respect. Don't ever allow anybody to put you down physically or mentally. You don't deserve that. And I want everybody to have a wonderful, blessed day. And if nobody's told you that you're loved, I'm telling you now that you are worth all the love in the world and then some. And I will talk to you guys soon. Have a wonderful, blessed day. See you later.